What's up guys, and welcome to my Mortenax Blade build guide. In this video, I'm taking you over his kit and eidolons, Lightcone options, Relic Stats, and planar ornaments, and then the stats you want to run for main stats and substats. Stuck grinding in Honkai Star Rail? Need Stellar Jades fast? We've got you covered. Head over to U7 Buy, your ultimate gaming hub for safe, fast, and cheap in-game top-ups. Whether it's Star Rail or your other favorite games, U7 delivers instantly and players love it. Check out their Trustpilot reviews, they're actually top ranked. On the Honkai Star Rail direct top-up page, you can recharge your account in seconds. For example, 80 Honorific shards cost $99.99 in the official store. However, on U7 Buy, you can see the price is cheaper. When you head over to U7 Buy, you might notice that the storefront display prices currently match the in-game store, but don't worry, the magic happens at checkout. Once you click the buy now button, your total instantly drops to our actual discounted price only. Just pick your server, enter UID, pay securely, and boom, your account is instantly loaded. Want extra savings? Use code PRETSR at checkout for 5% off, perfect for last minute pulls, battle passes, or surprising a friend. And here's a bonus. If you spend $80 a month on U7 Buy, you can grab the Honkai Star Rail Express Pass for only 1 cent, which is nearly free. Click on the link in my description, recharge fast, save more, and keep blazing those trails. Blade's basic attack does fire damage based off his max HP and will cause the enemy target he hits to enter the taunt state for 1 turn. His ultimate will inflict the Balefire Bind on all enemies. Enemies with that state will have their defense decreased by 30% and increase the damage they receive by 50% for 2 turns. Then will consume 20% of Blade's max HP to enter a zone. The zone being active will have Blade enter the Infinite Fury state, which will increase his crit rate by 20% and crit damage by 60%. Enhance his basic attack, unlock skill, and give Blade a new enhanced ultimate. Receiving a killing blow will not knock Blade down, but rather make him dispel the zone and exit the Infinite Fury state, and also restore HP equal to 50% of the unit's max HP. Gaining Infinite Fury will make a corresponding countdown appear on the action order bar with a fixed speed of 70. At the start of the countdown's turn, dispels the zone and exits the Infinite Fury state. His enhanced basic attack does the same thing as it did previously, but has a higher multiplier for the HP it does deal. His actual skill will consume 10% of Blade's HP and do fire damage based off his max HP to all enemies, with an additional 4 instances of damage, each doing fire damage based off Blade's max HP to a random enemy. Blade will not be able to use his skill if he is not in the Infinite Fury state or his HP is at 1. His skill will also not consume skill points. The enhanced ultimate will do fire damage based off 350% of Mortenax Blade's max HP to all enemies. His talent, while the zone is active, each allied target using an attack on an enemy will inflict the Balefire state on the corresponding enemy target and will grant 1 charge to Mortenax Blade. Blade reaching 9 points will make him consume 9 charges as long as his current HP is more than 1, and he will regenerate 25 energy and enables Mortenax Blade to use skill 1 extra time, and the extra skill is considered a follow-up attack. His technique attacks all enemies in range. After entering combat, taunts the enemies for 1 turn and decreases damage taken by this unit by 90% for 2 turns. For his bonus traces, its A2 will allow Blade to accumulate up to 80 overflow energy. Using ultimate will clear it and gain a corresponding amount of energy. The battle starting or when the zone is dispelled. If energy is below 75%, it is immediately regenerated to 75%, and when energy is regenerated to max, dispels all debuffs on this unit. His A4 will make it to where while his zone is active, increases the chance of being attacked by enemies and will decrease damage taken by this unit by 50%. And will increase incoming healing by 50%. After being attacked, inflicts Balefire state on the corresponding target and enables Blade to gain 1 charge. And his A6 will make allies do 50% increased damage while the zone is active. Another nihility aside from Blade being on the team will increase the team's ultimate damage dealt by 75%. Otherwise, Blade's own damage dealt will be increased by 75%. For his eidolons, his E1 will make it to where while the zone is active, all enemies all-type res will be lowered by 20%. Using the extra skill from the talent, the Infinite Fury countdown will have its action delayed by 15%. His E2 makes it to where anyone on the team using ultimate to do damage will make it considered as launching a follow-up attack. Follow-up attack damage dealt by allied targets increases by 75%, and the upper limit of Blade's charge decreases to 7. His E4 enhances his A6 to make it additionally increase allied damage dealt by 50%, and his E6, as the zone persists when Mortenax Blade takes damage or consumes HP, he gains a charge, and the effect can trigger again after any target's turn ends. The damage multiplier of his enhanced ultimate will be increased to 150% of the original value. For Blade's best Lightcones, he does have quite a few for different scenarios, but I do want to mention his own signature first, as it is his best for his personal damage. With 30% increase to the wearer's max HP and 20 fixed energy at the start of the wearer's turn that triggers once per wave, the wearer using skill to attack will inflict the target attack with the Purgatory State for 2 turns. While the enemy does have the Purgatory State, targets received crit damage will be increased by 30% and an additional 30% from the wearer, so in this case Blade. So 30% max HP, 20 energy once per wave, and 30% increased crit damage from anyone on the team, and an additional 30% from Blade specifically, so 60%. As I mentioned in the beginning, this is the best one you can run by far for his personal damage. Nothing else actually comes close to it. However, when it comes to his role of amp, it's actually not his best. This crit damage stuff it does provide isn't so bad, but it is not actually the best, as there are better options that compare, especially with the defense shred in his base kit, which we will get into in a second. So this having actual HP increases is very good, especially with the very high base HP it does have. Makes this the best option for Blade's own personal damage, and still a solid one for overall amp. Now, the actual best one for Blade's amp is Cypher's Lightcone, with 18% speed for the wearer and 120% base chance to inflict the Bamboozle State on every enemy target. Enemies under Bamboozled will have their defense decreased by 16% for 2 turns, and the wearer having 170 speed or higher will have an 120% base chance to inflict Death State, which will have the enemy's defense decreased by an additional 8% for 2 turns. So it's up to a 24% defense shred. You do build Blade with less crit stats and more focus on speed. In general, you try to get Blade as fast as you can while focusing on his personal damage. However, this Lightcone 1 makes it easier to build because you do get 18% speed, so you still would have to work a bit harder to get to that 170 speed. But reaching it would give you a full 24% defense shred, which pairs very good with his base 30%, because he does have 30% in his base kit. So with this Lightcone's full effect active plus his actual base kit, that's a total of 54% defense shred, which is very, very, very good. And then if you have other things on the team helping you with even more, such as someone like Astro who provides an additional 40%, whatever to push you up into the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and maybe even 100, makes it that much more powerful. The unfortunate side of this Lightcone though is with the base chance, you do need to build some effect hit rate. Thankfully, it's not as bad as like 100% base chance where you need upwards of 60%. To get the full effect to always land, you still would need roughly around 30%, which is still kind of annoying, especially on a character that doesn't want to build effect hit rate. So again, it is a little annoying in that front. But for pure amp, it is by far the best option. Another good one for his own personal damage is Acheron's signature Lightcone, providing 36% crit damage, where attacking an enemy will inflict a Mirage Fizzle on them for 1 turn. Enemies with Mirage Fizzle will take 24% increased damage from the wearer, and also an additional 24% from ultimate damage. So some extra crit damage is good, so whenever you crit, you do more damage. Having enemies have Mirage Fizzle will make them take 24% more damage, so your skill, the extra skill that's considered a follow-up attack, and the ultimate itself. And for the ultimate itself, it gets an additional 24%. Unfortunately, this only does apply to that actual ultimate, while his skill slash FUA does actually add up to a lot of damage throughout the battle, so unfortunately it's not getting the full effect. However, his ultimate is still a big chunk of that, so it's getting an extra bit here. And it's also not completely neglected, as it still gets that 24%. So besides the signature, for his own personal damage, Acheron's option would be the next best. Tutorial mission is also fine. It's a free S5, so we're just going to go to S5 right away. Effect hit rate part is useless, unfortunately, but it is for the 8 energy gained when the wearer does attack an enemy that has defense reduced. At the start, this can be annoying if you have no one on the team that has any other forms of defense shred for Blade to attack. So getting into ultimate can take slightly longer, since they won't be defense shed until you go into your ultimate zone. However, once you do, you get this extra bit. It helps you gain closer to getting more ultimates, and can net you even more ultimates, especially if you're something like not having E1, where you actually extend the duration, so that's why this can be more valuable. But in general, it just can net you more ultimates, and then when you need to build up to hold it to actually go out of zone and back into zone, it makes that easier as well. So tutorial mission is also another solid option. Doesn't really impact his personal damage nor his amp, unfortunately, but it kind of does in a front of giving him more ultimates. But that does depend on how many attacks you do end up getting to trigger this part. The Battle Pass Lightcone is also very good, with 16% damage for the wearer. The wearer attacking has a 100% base chance to inflict the target with vulnerability, increasing damage they receive by 10% for 2 turns. At S5, 32% damage and 16% vulnerability. So just overall damage for Blade, so he's just going to do more damage, and also some extra vulnerability. Depending on the team you're running him on, it can be oversaturated. If you're running him alongside Triby, or maybe even slightly invested in Asheville, it could be oversaturated, but if it's just Blade with this 50%, this is still fine. However, it's still two things that do work. It's good for Blade's damage, it's also good for the team's damage with the extra vulnerability. Only downside is it's also 100% base chance, so you would need to have some effect hit rate, and so the uptime can be a bit wonky because you're not actually going to want to run an effect hit rate body, spoiler alert, when we get to the relic part, because crit is very valuable and Blade's own damage is usually very valuable on teams. But when the effect does land, it is powerful. Finally, we get to Pearl's Lightcone, which attack an enemy that isn't ensnared has a 60% base chance to ensnare, and ensnared enemies have their defense decreased by 12%, and S5, 100% base chance for 16% shred for ensnared enemies. Same problem as anything else, as I mentioned, with the base chance stuff is Blade doesn't want effect hit rate really built. It's only exclusively for Lightcone stuff, which is very annoying when building him, and it's also an effect that is worse than Cypher's Lightcone, but when you are able to actually land this debuff, it's actually really damn good for Amp, since once again, Defense Shred pairs very good with this base kit. The only reason I mentioned this last is just because it is just that, it doesn't impact his own personal things, so when something doesn't apply, it's going to be a bit annoying, since Cypher at least gives you the speed and also has a higher base chance, needing significantly less effect hit rate, and overall better chance to actually apply. Same with the Battle Pass Lightcone, it has that damage for Blade as well. If this is not actually activating, it is completely useless. That's why I want to mention it last. While it could be good for Amp, better than some of the other options, the part of it actually landing is the annoying part. For Blade's best relic sets, the upcoming Divine set is going to be one of his best in slots, with the 2-piece increasing max HP by 12%, 4-piece increasing crit damage to enemy targets in the defense reduction state by 28%, where inflicting defense reduction state on enemy targets will give the team Comburance, which will last for 2 turns, can't be stacked, and damaged up by allied targets that have Comburant will increase by 15%, and the effect can be triggered again after the wearer uses an attack. 2-piece will increase his overall sources of damage since he is an HP scaler. 4-piece can further increase his damage since he is able to do a full AoE shred because of his zone. So when his zone is active, you will be doing 28% increase crit damage dealt to enemy targets, which is higher than Pioneers even when the effect is active. And you're also buffing the team with 15% damage percent, which you're able to keep up pretty frequently. So not only is this actually best for his overall damage, especially since the 2-piece is a lot more valuable than a lot of other options, because it also does give you crit damage dealt to the defense reduction state enemies, which is good. It's also somewhat supportive, giving the team 15% damage dealt, especially as Blade's role being a sub DPS or even a main DPS that also does amp the entire team. This further actually helps with that, which makes this, again, one of his overall best in slots. As I mentioned, that set is still also best for his overall damage. If you're looking for a different set of his damage, he has 3 other ones that don't actually do better, but they are comparable, at least until you get one of the other sets. And by one of the other sets, I mean the Divine set. One of them being Pioneer itself, with 12% increased damage dealt to enemies with debuffs from the 2-piece. 4-piece providing 4% crit rate, where doing 8%/12% increased crit damage to enemies with at least 2/3 debuffs, where inflicting a debuff on an enemy target will increase the aforementioned effects by 100% for 1 turn. 2-piece will practically just always be extra 12% damage. 4-piece can give you up to an 8% crit rate, and also up to 24% crit damage dealt, so less than the actual Divine set, but it also does give you some crit rate, which makes it easier to build. And he inflicts a bunch of debuffs, so the actual effect is very easy. So this would be the other option you would use if you're wanting to focus on his damage, which is mainly what you do. You can also use Scholar for the 2-piece providing 8% crit rate, 4-piece increasing damage dealt by skill and ultimate by 20%. After using ultimate, additionally increases damage dealt by next skill by 25%. Very simple. 2-piece makes them easier to build. 4-piece just increases skill and ultimate damage, which is mainly what you're focusing on. Even if the extra skill from talent is considered a follow-up attack, it's still getting the skill part at least, and then anytime you ult, that next skill you do will have an additional 25% increase for damage. Slightly worse than Pioneer, but still is fine. And finally, if you really need crit rate, you can use the Longevious set. 2-piece providing 12% max HP, 4-piece when the wearer is hit or has their HP consumed by an ally or themselves. They will gain 8% crit rate for 2 turns. This stacks up to 2 times, so 16% crit rate from the 4-piece. 2-piece, just like the Divine set, increases all forms of damage with 12% max HP. And then, as I mentioned, 4-piece is just really there if you need that extra crit rate. The last set I want to mention is our good old Eagle Friend, which is also very much usable with the 4-piece, giving the wearer an actual advance forward by 25% when using ultimate. Since Blade goes into ultimate and you want to use that ultimate as much as you can, the frequency of how much you get those extra skills and get that energy going does very much impact the value of this set, as it can enable you to straight up use something like HP boots, but that also makes setup a little more annoying, and that's also reliant on maybe if you have enough RNG to get hit or other energy sources, so on and so forth. But nonetheless, it does enable that. It enables you to get more turns, which is very good on teams that want that high frequency going, such as Asheville combos. As I mentioned with this set, or anytime I mention D2D, be sure you're actually hitting a breakpoint where it's sending you an extra turn, or at least making you act quicker to whereas you would usually die. Otherwise, you're not getting much value out of this, as the set is a lot harder to pilot, so do keep that in mind. Ornaments. Bone Set is going to be the best for his damage with 12% max HP and also 28% crit damage. 5,000 max HP is not going to be hard, so just free 12% max HP and 28% crit damage. Max HP is good. The extra crit damage is also nice. Overall, for damage, this is going to be good. However, if you do get E2 Blade, Durn can be competitive. With anyone on the team using a follow-up attack, will give the stack of merit to the wearer up to 5 times, with each stack increasing follow-up damage dealt by 5%. And reaching 5 stacks will also increase the wearer's crit damage by 25%. So it's less crit damage than Bone by a little bit, but instead you're getting 25% follow-up damage. The reason I say E2 specifically is because at pre-E2, so E1 or less, his ultimate, the big one, is not actually considered a follow-up attack, so it does not get impacted with this. So it only actually be the talent's follow-up attack, the skill itself, which will actually never be considered one, and the ultimate wouldn't if you don't have E2. But if you have E2, it's counted for this, and it actually gets buffed by this fully, which is what makes it actually more competitive with Bone. And now for pure Amper and for pure setup, Mortenax Blade, Von Walk would be the option you want to use for 5% energy regen rate, and entering battle with 120 speed or higher will advance the wearer's action by 40%. So it just helps you with more energy regen rate, which can add up to some stuff throughout the battle, but mainly for this part of giving you a 40% advance forward entering battle. That is going to allow you to immediately attack, and maybe you just need to get hit one more time, which is a lot easier than relying on multiple hits and Blade taking a while to act, maybe even before some others, where damage is going to be unbuffed by him and you're going to miss on a lot of early turn damage. That's why Von Walk comes in, to let you get into ult very, very much quicker. So for strictly that setup and you want to focus less on his damage overall, then Von Walk would be your goal. For the main stats on the relics, for the body, you're primarily going to run crit rate. However, if you do get a lot of crit rate rolls, especially with the 20% crit rate in his actual base kit, then you can opt to run crit damage, but for the most part, you are probably going to be aiming for crit rate. For the feat, speed is usually going to be the goal, especially if you're trying to get into ultimate quicker. Just getting your breakpoint of 134 is fine. However, aiming to the around 141 section is also good, so you can get more actions in your zone once you go into it and not just exit it right before you get another turn. So 134 ideally is fine, especially if you have E1, that you don't have to worry about the 141 breakpoint. Anything past that is still very much welcome. The more speed you get, the faster you can actually act. Unless you have Von Walk, then you don't really need to get much more. With Eagle setups, you could aim for speed depending if you're aiming for extra actions, or if you want to run a base speed setup where you're still just trying to aim for the 2 turns, or potentially maybe one extra depending on how much ults you can actually get, then you could opt for HP boots. But for the most part, speed is going to be your goal. For the orb, HP percent is usually better, but if you have a really good fire orb, you can end up using that. HP is just better just because in his kit he has a lot of damage percent buffs as opposed to HP percent. So usually HP percent is going to outperform. However, you can use a fire orb. And for the link up, you primarily want to run HP percent. And for the substats, it's pretty much your generic focus with speed, crit rate, crit damage, HP percent. For speed, just get it to either the breakpoint goal if that's enough for you, and especially if you have something like E1. So 134, if you're running an E0, getting to around 141 to 142 is highly recommended. And even for either or, just getting more past that is welcome, but you don't have to focus on it as much past that 134. It's just so you can get into your ultimate quicker, especially if that's very important for your setups. Then crit rate, getting it to 80% in battle is very important, just so when you go into your ultimate, that's 100%. If you have stuff like Sparkle Lightcone on the team, or any form of crit rate buff that's giving like 10%, so Sparkle Cone, and or something like RMC, then you'd subtract the amount you would need if Blade is your primarily buff focus. So Sparkle Cone would mean you'd only need 70% because that becomes 80%, and then that becomes 100% in zone, so on and so forth. Crit damage, just get it to as much as you can. You don't really need to focus on too much since he has a good amount of crit damage sources as well, but outside of battle, just having around 150% is fine, and also focusing on HP percent equally is very important. Without signature, just aiming around 7,000 to 8,000 is good. With signature, you can probably aim for 8,000 to 8,500 or even higher than that. That is the full Mortenax Blade build guide. I do hope you found this video helpful. If you did, dropping a like would be greatly appreciated. If you're new to the channel or haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe and turn on the bell icon for future videos like this, along with all the types of style content, and I'll see you later. Peace out.